the next session is a focus on two, well, almost neighboring countries, Germany and Portugal, which each country actually has its own way to solve the offshore wind puzzle. And to talk about that, we are remotely connected to Cláudia Lucas in Lisbon and Sohn in Hamburg. Good morning, the two of you.
Good morning.
Can you hear us?
Hi.
You, Lisa.
Hello, good morning. Yes. Thank you for joining us. Now, Cláudia, you are offshore wind consultant at Portugal's Renewable Energy Association, APREN. Portugal's ambitious plan for floating offshore wind that was pushed back by a few months because there was a change in government, there were elections, but the plans are now back on track. So what's the government aiming to do? Tell us more.
Okay, so good morning to everyone. Thank you for Seanergy for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be here. I will start to do by a short summary. Portugal started the floating offshore process in the 22 with the creation of the interministerial working group of the Seanergy and infrastructures areas created to present to the government a report with the guidelines for Portugal. So this working group is composed by 3 subgroups. The first one, led by DGRM, which is the Portuguese entity, the public Portuguese entity that regulates all the activities in the sea, was dedicated to maritime special planning, which is the identification of specific offshore zones and the energy potential of each area, and also the interconnection to the transmission system operator, grid connections definition to onshore grid. The second group, which was led by the JEG, had the objective of presenting a model for the attribution of the grid capacity reservation title, which is the TRC, and a model for the maritime special using title, which is the TUPEN. This TUPEN and TRC are titles defining on the Portuguese regulation to begin the development of offshore projects. The third group, it was led by the Portuguese Association of Ports, and this group has the aim of assessing the development needs of porting structures in all the Portuguese ports that we have in our coastline. So in the end of 23, the subgroup 1, led by the GRM, presented the location plan for offshore renewable energy. In Portuguese is the PAER, and this, which was under public consultation until the end of 23. This report is being finalized, considering all the contributions made by the Portuguese society. These pre-selected areas was presented in this report, and they are 5 areas with estimated total capacity of around 10 gigawatts. They are the 5 areas along the coastline, starting by Viana do Castelo, south and north, Leixões, Ericeira, and then Sines. So the subgroup 2, led by the General Directorate of Energy and Geology, they study different approach for the auction model, mainly a centralized auction and a decentralized auction. Also presented a sequencing proposal to the maritime areas that aim to gradually make available the proposed areas and lots. The lots will be 500 megawatts, considering the following criteria. First one, the evolution of electric consumption, taking into account expressions of interest related to investments in the hydrogen value chain and other structuring project and strategic. the evolution on time to market for offshore wind farms, the evolution of the levelized electricity cost of floating offshore wind farms, the international offshore auction schedules to avoid impasses and promote synergies positive, and also the feasibility of implementing onshore and offshore electric infrastructures. Finally, the subgroup number 3 identify the supply chain which is necessary for the country for all this process. Well, as all Europe knows, due to the fall of the government in November of 23, Portugal have to wait until 10 of March when the new prime minister was elected to continue with the floating offshore process. The previous government left a folder with the recommendations of the working group of this all this work that these 3 subgroups had done. It was put in a transition folder and delivered to the new government. So therefore, we think that after the expression of interest and dialogue session that already happened, we will enter in the second stage of the model. This July of 24, it will be announced the first auction. The pre-qualification maybe in the end of 24. We don't yet know the dates. Also the wind selected, and the second phase, the binding of TUPEN and CHRC with CFD. So this is how this is the
plan.
The picture of Portugal.
Yes. You mentioned different zones with that could include up to 10 gigawatts. But for now, I understand, the government was first aiming for 10 gigawatts in 2030. Now these plans for 2030 have been downgraded to 3.5 gigawatts. Do you have an idea when Portugal could see 10 gigawatts of floating offshore wind in commission? By what year?
Yes. Well, 10 gigawatts was the target announced for the first time by the Prime Minister in 22, but in a logic of potential and allocation of connection points. The working group then, after that, proposed that the first tender should start with 3.5 gigawatts, and starting from the pre-selected areas in the north of Portugal, which are the Viana do Castelo, Figueira da Foz, Leixões and Figueira da Foz. But the proposal revision of the Portuguese Energy and Climate Plan submitted to the European Commission settled a target of 2 gigawatts installed and 10 gigawatts attributed until 2030. The final version of the National Energy Climate Plan should be submitted to the European Commission by the end of this June, on the 30th of this June. But the final version has still not been presented at national level, which can still bring some changes. Nevertheless, the new government already announces news for July, as I mentioned, for the first auction, and the objective is to schedule forward, taking advantage of the experience of the first one to learn and correct what is necessary to reach the 10 gigawatts in 2030.
All right, great. Well, so Portugal is trying to aim for a lot in a very short time. Thank you very much for that, Cláudia Lucas. Now, on the other side of France, there's obviously Germany, a neighboring country. Hans Sohn, you are Senior Regulatory Affairs Manager at German Industry Association BWO in Germany, and which just published the results of its third tender with negative bids, right? Talk us through.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Thank you very much for inviting me, and sorry I couldn't make it to Seanergy this time. Great to be here virtually, and happy to talk about the auction results, not election results. Yeah, we've seen the results of a 2.5 gigawatt tender a few days ago. It was about non-centrally pre-investigated sites, 2 of them. And we've seen two winners. Total Energies has won 1.5 gigawatt lease with a bid of around 2 billion euros, and NBW has secured the right to develop and operate an offshore wind farm of 1 gigawatt and paid around 1 billion euros for that. So yeah, good to see two different winners here, and interesting to see some slightly less aggressive bids than last year. Like if you look at the amount paid per megawatt, which we think could be about more certainty about wind yields and maybe some price increases in the supply chain.
Yeah, but still they have to pay to develop the wind farms. How can that be profitable for developers?
It's a good question. Yeah, it obviously is only profitable for the remaining two bidders. And yeah, RWE made headlines by pulling out from the bidding consortium with Total Energies and last minute saying that result or the final bid did not meet their profitability expectations. Of course, that's interesting. So yeah, we believe that the winning bids of Total Energies and NBW, they to some extent reflect the scale of projects that they have or they have the rights to develop to. NBW is just building a wind farm in the North Sea and has two already in place. So looks at cluster of around 2.5 gigawatts, I believe, and Total Energies has the right to develop some 3.5 gigawatts in the German North Sea, which is quite a lot. We currently have 8.5 gigawatts installed in Germany total. So those are big clusters that they can work with and create synergies. And yeah, I think it also helps if you have if you need to decarbonize your refinery business with green hydrogen that you need green electricity for, like Total Energies and BP has. And e-mobility charging has also been mentioned by a few successful bidders. There's NBW is big in that, and BP also in Germany. But yeah, of course, that will create a lot of price pressure in the market, in the supply chain. We'll see how that works out.
And what's the government planning to do with the money?
Yeah, it is indeed a lot of money that's been raised. It's about 16 billion euros in total so far, with last year's and this year's auctions, with one auction remaining in this year, which is actually the bigger auction. So that's split up into 10 and 90% ratio. You will need to pay 10% of that winning bid within 1 year, and 90% in the operation phase, so much later, and the 10%, which is quite interesting, was supposed to be used for marine nature protection projects and the support of environmentally friendly fishing practices. And so, well, here's the kicker. Last year, the German government needed some money and introduced a new plan to split these 10% up in a different way. So they use 6% and for a new transformation component, they called it, and just yeah, to have it for the general budget. We think that's generally a good idea to have that transformation component, but it should actually be used for the transformation that we're all working on. So yeah, we see some bottlenecks that need to be resolved, like ports development, which will be cost intensive, and yeah, we should take some of that money that's been raised to support development of ports and other things.
We just heard about, the negative bids you mentioned, but obviously Germany is organizing 2 tenders, or has been organizing 2 tenders a year over the past couple of years. There are also other criteria, non-price criteria, right, that have been deployed.
Yes, we'll see another auction this year, starting in August 1, which is actually the bigger auction, 5.5 gigawatts, and it's about centrally pre-investigated sites. So the award will be based on a system that gives you points, 60 points for the price, again, the negative bidding, the price you pay, but in a sealed bid, not a dynamic bidding system. And 35 points will be given for 4 different criteria, which include environmentally friendly foundations, which is mostly about the noise levels that are associated with them. And the other thing is the share of trainees you have in your company, and one other criterion is the amount of green, or the share of green electricity that you're using to produce the turbines that you like to use. And the fourth one is like the amount of power purchase agreements you have in place. So it's about off-taking. Yeah. On top of that, we are curious to learn what the European Commission will come up with the Net Zero Industry Act, with non-price criteria, maybe even pre-qualification criteria. And we think, the German system should be based less on negative bidding. Looking forward to see what kind of ideas coming out of the European Commission. And we also have 2 other ideas for German market auctions. The sites should be a bit smaller. We've seen sites up to 2 gigawatts being tendered. We believe 1 or between 1 and 2, between 1 and 1.5 gigawatts should be enough. And there should only be 1 site that every bidder can win. So that should increase or keep the diversity of actors high in the market, which is what we think reduces risks of execution.
Just before I let you go very briefly, we talked about the tenders that have happened. More tenders are planned. There are a lot of tenders planned until 2030. Germany is aiming for 30 gigawatts of commissioned offshore wind by 2030, with 4 to 8 gigawatt of capacity tendered out each year, and that will put a lot of pressure, right, on developers, but also on the supply chain.
There's pressure on both sides. So for developers, it will be difficult to deal with bottlenecks that we see in the market. If you want to implement projects around 2030, there is a high demand in many markets in Europe, and we see some sort of peak at that time. So port capacity, as already mentioned, will be quite scarce, and also capacity within the supply chain, be it ships or vessels, installation vessels, will be difficult to secure them in time and at a good price. So there's also another rule that will put a lot of pressure on developers in Germany that we think should be changed. If you have the right to develop a project, let's say up to 2 gigawatts, as the VP has one last year, you will need to have everything in place within 6 months after a certain deadline. Given all the weather conditions that we can think of, should be more flexibility there. I think some flexibility of up to 12 months would be more appropriate in that regard. And as for the supply chain, of course, there will be a lot of price pressure on them, given all these negative bids and the right prices that are being paid. So we need to create a stable outlook, give a lot of reliability, trust, and plannability. Very much liked the discussion that I heard before from the EDF colleague. He said we need to depoliticize offshore wind. Germany will see federal elections next year. It will be important to keep these targets in place that we see right now. I think, our French colleagues in the room will understand.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Hans Sohn. Thank you, Cláudia Lucas, for all your insights. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.